Alrighty, so the next area to discuss is what's called an empirical formula. An empirical formula is also known as the simplest formula. And so what it is the simplest ratio of the atoms in a molecule when you compare all the atoms to each other. So sometimes the molecular formula or chemical formula that you have can be the same as the empirical formula. For example, the molecular formula NaCl, sodium chloride, has one Na and one Cl. And the ratio of them to each of these two atoms to each other is a 1-to-1. So that's as simple as it can get. You can't reduce this anymore. So it's also the empirical formula. But a formula like C3H9, chemical formula or molecular formula, is a 3-to-9 ratio, or reduced down to the least common or the greatest common multiple of 3. Each divided by 3 gives you CH3. So that's the simplest ratio or the empirical formula. CH3 is not the same thing as C3H9, but the ratio of the atoms to each other is the same. Again, not the same chemical, not the same substance, but the ratio is the same. Okay. So how does this work? How do we do this? Well, here's a problem. A compound has a composition of 90.10 grams phosphorus, 8.90 grams of hydrogen. And the question is, what's the empirical formula? Well, if you're going to compare these two atoms to each other, you have to get it into the most fundamental unit that we've talked about, which is the mole. So how do you go from grams to moles? Think about it. It's molar mass. So to convert from moles, grams to mass, you need molar mass. Molar mass of phosphorus is 30.97 grams. So again, what you want goes on top. The moles go on top. So 1 mole over 30.97. So 90.10 divided by the 30.97. The grams of phosphorus cancel, leaving you with the moles of phosphorus on top. And it gives you 2.909 moles of phosphorus. 4 significant figures because of this over here. The same thing for the hydrogen, 8.90 grams divided by the molar mass of hydrogen. So for every 1 mole of hydrogen, there's 1.01 grams molar mass right from the periodic table. You do the math, you get 8.81 moles. 3 significant figures, 3 significant figures. So now that you've got the moles down, now what you have to do is compare these two numbers. And so what you do is you look at the two. You have 2.909, 8.81. Determine which is the smaller of the two. So once you've determined the smaller of the two, which is 2.909, you take that and divide it into all of the numbers that you've calculated for moles. So you calculated two numbers, 2.909 and 8.81. So you have to divide the smallest of them, 2.909, into all of them. So that means 2.909 divided by 2.909, of course, equals 1. And 8.81 divided by 2.909 gives you 3.02, which rounds very, very closely to 3. So what that tells you is that the ratio of phosphorus to hydrogen is 1-to-3. P1, H is 3. So the simplest formula, or the empirical formula, is pH 3. Okay, so that's the simplest kind of problem that you can get.